Hello, everyone, and welcome to Full-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. I'm your host, Ash Woolford. Joining me this week are the Jacks. How you doing, Mozza?
Very well, thank you. Well up for a London derby this weekend.
And AJ, how are you, mate?
I'm all good. I'm all good.
Obviously, we're here to talk about the Palace game coming up this weekend. It's a bit of a important one in my household. Anyone who knows me knows I now live in Croydon, so there's a lot of Palace fans around me. So it's a game I definitely always want us to do well in. Also, the last couple of home games we've had against them have been a little bit frustrating to watch. So, let's go into this one and obviously look at that. Um, we're playing a Palace team that are a bit of a mixed bag at the moment. It's really hard to sort of know what you're going to get. The Palace seem to be playing a lot better away from home than they are at home. So, if anything, it might be a bit more of a disadvantage that we're actually at home in this game than if we were playing at Sellers Park. But let's hope we can get a good result in this one, and we'll look at that now. AJ, sort of looking at the starting 11 in this one, would you change much from the Forest game on Saturday, in which we were actually pretty decent in?
Would I change much? Probably not for a change. I think ESR has deserved his to retain his place for the meantime. And he had a pretty good appearance last time around at Crystal Palace, if I remember correctly. So yeah, give him the run of the mill. Again, I would say maybe start Willian, but Iwobi did what he does. And you really can't fault Adama for his last performance. So yeah, I don't think there's an awful lot to change. I think all of the holes that we had problems with going into the last game, we mended. So hopefully that stays that way.
Yeah, well, I think that realistically, this is one of those games that we might actually get a bit of a reaction from ESR in because even when he was at Arsenal, Palace was a game he always particularly played well at. I think being a Croydon boy, he always likes to do well against Palace.
Mm.
Whether that's just a psychological thing or not, I don't know. And he was excellent in the game at Sellers Park early on in the season. So we'll see how that sort of goes from there. Mozza, we were all really happy about the result last weekend against Forest. It was a really decent performance. Quite a lot of people have sort of described it as the best we've been at home in a long time. Um, how important is it that we backed up that result last week with a really, really good win this weekend, or at least, come in with the same intensity and the same sort of play that we did last weekend?
I think it's absolutely imperative that we do. If we're still trying to push for a place in Europe, then yeah, it's an absolute must. There's nothing about the Palace side really that worries me too much, even though you just said they've been playing better away from home. And as we always say, broken record and all that. Oh, it would be a very Fulham thing for them to do us at Craven Cottage. But I think we should expect, or we hope to expect, the same style of play that we had against Forest last weekend. Um, I know you asked the question to AJ first about the lineup and bits like that. I wouldn't want to see any changes. I think we just need to have that same intensity, and I think we can get 3 points out of them. And if you look at the table now, where we are eighth as we are currently sat at time of recording, Villa on the same points, but we're just above in goal difference, and Newcastle just a couple of points above us. Obviously, depending on whatever results there are at the weekends, we could move up. So, yeah, I'm feeling quite positive.
Yeah, obviously we know we go into this game and we know that if we have any sort of realistic hopes of Europe this season, which we all hope that we do, we're hoping that the quality on the pitch can stay there and we can qualify for Europe. The only way that's going to happen is that we can get some more consistency, especially at home.
Mm.
We seem to be like Palace, performing really well away from home. We seem more comfortable playing at home than we do at home. Whether that's just if it's a psychological thing or there's a thing about the support and the way that the players have sort of dealt with at home in our way, I don't know. But our home form has probably been our weakest link so far this season, which is a bit of an odd thing for us to say because we did 13 years in the Premier League where we pretty much never won away from home and relied solely on winning at home to sort of keep us going in the league. AJ, sort of looking at not just the Palace game on Saturday, but sort of the remainder of the season, being realistic and our hopes of, potentially getting into that 8th spot and getting the European spot. How important is it that the consistency stays there and that, the intensity from the squad stays the same and we don't end up like we did last year where, for 10 games left of the season, we were pretty much just on the beach?
Well, the important part is right now we need to go into our next 3-4 games with the utmost intensity possible and give ourselves something to fight for. Because if we drop off now, there's nothing to fight for later. It's
Mhm.
it's not in this case, it needs to be a sprint, not a marathon. We can afford to drop a couple of points along the way, but if we win consistently now and put ourselves in a good position to be competitive now, it will give us something that along the last maybe 5 games, we can go, okay, we need to win maybe 2 of them, as opposed to getting into the last 5 games, needing to win all 5 games to be in any shot of doing it and just deciding, you know what, we're not going to. We'll just start prepping for next season, which none of us want to see us do after what happened last year. As you said, we were on the beach. So I think it needs to be a sprint right now, get as many points on the board as possible, and then we'll have the luxury of taking our foot off the gas a little bit because people will be chasing us instead of the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like looking at our next sort of 5 home games in the league, especially, well, next 5 games of the league, not necessarily home. Obviously, we've got Palace on Saturday, and then we're away at Wolves on Tuesday, which is going to be a really hard game. Wolves,
Mhm.
as bad as they've been this season, they gave us a hell of a beating when we played them on earlier on. I know they got an awful lot of luck in the sense of almost everything they tried worked and they beat us, but that 4-1 defeat was psychologically damaging for us, and we need to make sure that we
Mm.
go into that game sort of trying to rectify that a bit. Ignore United away in the cup. We then got Brighton away, Spurs at home, and then Arsenal away. The next 5 games, realistically, looking at those sort of 5 games in hand, if we're going to stay competitive and go for Europe, how many points do you both feel that we need in order to sort of stay within the hunt? Mozza, start with you, mate. Like, look at those 5 games. You look at
Yeah.
Palace, Wolves, Brighton, Tottenham, and Arsenal. Realistically, how many points do you think we need to get from out of 15 in order to stay competitive and actually gonna go? No, we are meaning to go for Europe.
Just also with the Premier League table up in front of me and just comparing the points there of the other teams above us and where we need to get to. And then looking at the next set of fixtures as well. Yeah, it's a tough one to call. You'd be thinking out of those. Are you asking out of the rest of the games of the season or just the next 5?
No,
Sorry.
just look at the next 5 games, right? Out of the
Yeah,
next 15 points that are available to us. If we're gonna go into that lot, basically looking to we're gonna go to the last 5 games of the season and
yeah.
actually be competitive and not be on the beach. How many points do you think we need out of the next 15 available to us in order for it? Because if we mess up on Saturday or if we, go into, because there's a really hard string of games that Tottenham, Arsenal, then we've
Yeah.
got Liverpool and Bournemouth. Like those 4 games, realistically, we come out of those with no points and play exceptionally well. Come out of that with no points, but I don't want to go into that position being there and then going, we're just gonna ride out the rest of the season because we all saw that last year.
Mm.
So out of 15 points that are available to us, I know that includes that Spurs game and the Arsenal game. How many do you think we need in order to stay competitive so that we stay competitive for the rest of the
Yeah.
season rather than sort of giving up on ourselves?
I'm thinking 10, and that's almost like the minimum for me. So you're thinking at least 3 wins, 1 draw. But how realistic is that? I mean, we'll give our score predictions later for the upcoming Palace game. I think that is a win, though. Wolves away. Funnily enough, I think that might be the draw. Brighton away. I'm not sure. I'd feel more confident about that, but you're quite right. Yeah, Spurs at home. anything can happen, can't it? But I'd be confident about us getting 3 points out of that. Arsenal away, I'm not positive. How many is that? I'm not very good with maths. That's the 5, isn't it? I think a lot of it might come down to how well we do, or if we beat United away. Obviously, that's the FA Cup, but will that knock the confidence of the squad as well? How much of a difference is there going to be in the lineup that Marco Silva decides to put out that day? It's tough. Just looking at the next run of games, even after that, the ones in the rest of the season, it's going to be difficult. Even like a look further along, Southampton away. I know that's not in the question that you asked, but I can see us losing at Southampton away. So, but yeah, overall, I reckon at least 3 wins, at least 1 draw.
So 10 points out of the next 15 in order to
Yeah.
stay competitive. What about you, AJ? What do you think? Sort of being realistic, because obviously there'll be the way this season's going. There'll be results that sort of go either way that we're not involved in. But what do you realistically think in order to stay competitive for the rest of the season? What do you think we need in these next 5?
I think we need a minimum of 7. I would like to see a minimum of 9. It's like looking at those 5 fixtures. I don't care which order they come in. In all honesty, with the way Fulham have been behaving, I'd expect losses to Palace and Wolves, a draw at Brighton, and then a win against Spurs and Arsenal, because that's just what we've been doing all season. That's how I look at the fixtures and go, right, if we're going to go based off everything that's happened this season so far, that's what will happen. We'll lose the next 2. We'll all shit our pants. Everyone will be making a big fuss going into the United game. Does that go to a replay if we draw it, or replay scrapped now?
No, there's no replays in the cup.
So that could go to penalties, which just then further stresses us out. We go into Brighton, draw that game probably with a semi-decent result, sitting there thinking the season's over, going into Spurs, beat them comfortably, hard-fought match at Arsenal, beat them, and then we're suddenly all guns are blazing going into Liverpool. It's like that's how Fulham are. We will think the season's written off by the time we get to Tottenham, and then we'll win back-to-back games against Tottenham and Arsenal because they're London derbies and big teams. Despite the fact that obviously Tottenham are below us in the table, it's the consideration of what sort of club they are. But in what I would hope in reality would happen, win against Palace, draw against Wolves, win against Brighton, win against Tottenham. Arsenal, anything can happen. Probably lose because they'll be pushing to try and close the gap on Liverpool at that point, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. And for me, there's a reason for the tie-in, obviously. We've been talking a lot about, off the field things going on at Fulham at the moment, ticket prices and the way the club is structured money-wise and all that sort of stuff. And we all had that discussion when we were talking about ticket prices, that all the ticket price increases and all of that stuff that the club have done this year don't even touch the water on what the club would have made money-wise extra if they just hadn't been on the beach for 10 games last year. If we discussed it, if we finished 2 places higher than we did last year, that would have been an extra £4 million in the bank for the club, and that's way more than any of the ticket price increases have actually been this year. Which is the reason why I bring it up, because obviously, touch wood, we stay competitive. We want Europe. We want the opportunity to do that. And in a league that's been as crazy as the Premier League has been this year, in the terms of everyone beating everybody, and you look how close that at the top of the table is, we need to be making sure that we're staying competitive in order for us not to get completely blown away, because we are in one of those really weird situations at the moment where we could get 10 points out of the next 5 games, find ourselves sat on 49 points going into that Bournemouth game, being level on points with them, knowing that if we win we're in the top 7, but also knowing us, we could completely blow it out and, just start free falling down the table. And then we start looking at, games like that Bournemouth game going, actually, we need this just to reassure. I don't think we're under any threat of relegation. or anything like that. But realistically, we have to look at it and go, we could very easily finish mid-table. We could very easily finish 7th. It's one of those things. It depends on how we stay sort of focused and we stay motivated to actually perform. Because we were all really disappointed last season when we spent that whole block of games just completely we're just going through the motions on a game day, and it only really felt like Luton last game of the season where they woke up and started playing football again after being off it for weeks. None of us want that, So that's the reason why I asked. But let's look at this. Let's finish this podcast how we always finish our match previews. AJ, I'm going to start with you, mate. Give us a couple of players to watch from both teams and a scoreline prediction for the game on Saturday, please.
Mateta is an obvious choice for Palace, I feel. Very dangerous. Eze, if he's fit and available to play, will be obvious. Fulham players to watch. Can Adama have back-to-back good performances? He's gonna fancy himself against a back five where he can get space between a centre back and a wing back. And then I think it will actually be a good game for Raul if he starts. I can actually see we might rest him for the Wolves game, but if we don't, then I think he will have a stellar performance. Score prediction, I think it'll be 3-2 Fulham.
Okay, and what about you, Mozza?
Yeah, not too unsimilar to what AJ has just said. Mateta is who I'm most concerned about from Palace and Sarr. I appreciate they lost against Everton the last game, but I thought they seemed like quite an aerial threat, which I think is something that we might struggle with. If our lineup is still the same as it was against Forest, it will be interesting to see how our back four deal with that. But my ones to watch for us, ESR, who we mentioned earlier. Let's see, can he maintain that confidence, that consistency that he showed or has shown recently? Jimenez as well, actually, pretty much in the same boat as ESR. I think it'd be good for him to get a goal or two, just purely out of confidence again. And yeah, Traore, hopefully he will be starting. I want to see him start. I thought he was absolute fire. I think in the last podcast I nominated him as my player of the match. So those are my picks.
And scoreline prediction?
And my scoreline prediction, my apologies. Do you know what? I fancy a clean sheet, and it ain't going to happen, is it? But I'm going to go with 3-0 Fulham.
Oh, 3-0 Fulham. Wow. Okay, that's exceptionally positive from you, Mozza. Okay, so I look at this Palace team, and I chat to. I don't have any sort of inside knowledge on Palace, but I do often chat quite a lot with people around me about Palace. So we're often talking about their players that their fans are sort of appreciating it as it is. Mateta is an outstanding striker. We spoke about him in length before we played them at Selhurst Park earlier on this season. I genuinely think he's one of the best strikers in the league in terms of putting the ball in the net, and he has a natural ability at that we have to be very, very much aware of. And he seems to be, other than the fact he's scoring again lately, scoring more goals away from home than he does at home. So we have to watch that. I think it may be because of the way that Oliver Glasner has them playing away from home. They play with a little bit more freedom away from home rather than structured in the way they do at home. I fully expect Marco to have done his research on that, and we'll play the way that may frustrate them. We did a really good job at doing that when we played them at Selhurst Park earlier on in the season. And much like the Forest game last week, we made some small tweaks in the way that we play, but it was in order to frustrate them and sort of stifle the way they play, and it helped to sort of move forward. So we'll see that. The other players to watch out for them, Daniel Munoz I think is a really good player, and Justin Denve, who's obviously Devaney, sorry, he's a young player, but he's very, very, very well liked at Palace, and he's been doing really well when I have seen him play so far this season. So we have to watch him because he may give us a few sort of issues. You know, the obvious ones are obviously Eberechi Eze, who I think he's been coming back from injury. So, you know, how much we see of him, I don't know. And it's knowing our luck. You know, we're sitting here talking about Mateta, and you know, we'll have to watch out for. We'll be sitting here talking about him, and we'll have to watch out for Nketiah, who has done nothing for them all season, and will probably score on Saturday because that's the way we roll. Scoreline wise, you know, I am confident going into this game. You know, Palace are a lot different away from home than they are at home. They've been on form away from home, but I still think that realistically, in the state of the way our season is going at the moment, it's a really important game on Saturday, and I think that we will go into it with the intensity of that being so. I'm going to go 3-1. I don't see us keeping this clean sheet because, you know, keeping clean sheets isn't necessarily been our strongest point. But I'm going to go 3-1 as a scoreline prediction. But, you know, I'll happily take that 3-0 that you're calling for, Mozza, and we'll see it from there. Anyone going to the game on Saturday, obviously enjoy the game, have fun. You know, it's always a good atmosphere when we're playing against Palace. Their fans are always pretty decent. So hopefully that will sort of inspire us to be a bit better than we have been recently at home and make a bit of noise. But who knows? You know, there is some negativity off the field at the club at the moment, which is affecting, I think, some of our atmospheres. But we shall see. Lads, thank you very much for joining me for this preview. We will be back on Monday with our review of this game. And we'll also probably be doing a preview for the Wolves game at the same time, as that game will be on Tuesday night. Everyone who is watching, thank you very much. Please do like and subscribe to the show, share it with your Fulham mates, comment on the show, let us know your scoreline predictions. Thanks very much for joining us this week, and come on, you Whites.